This is NewsWire on SportsGrid. Good morning. Thanks for watching the show here on this Wednesday as we get toward the Final Four, Major League Baseball, NFL, news and notes. Got a big one to give you here on the show today. I'll get to that in just a second. Of course, we got great guests coming up on the program. Guests, of course, talking college basketball. Kyle Irving will join us here on the show. Simon Applebaum with the very latest on TV, news, notes, streaming information, and the business of sports as well. And naturally, our guest contributor from Legal Sports Report will be with us, and we'll get into everything happening in the world of sports betting. But we begin with a blockbuster trade in the National Football League, which happened just minutes ago, if not seconds ago. In fact, it's just going to be me and you talking here because this is like happening as we speak. The Buffalo Bills are parting ways with wide receiver Stephon Diggs. The Pro Bowler is being sent to the Houston Texans, according to ESPN. And in return, there is what is being reported as draft pick compensation. Now, that obviously will be the key to figuring this out. For those of you who have been following Stephon Diggs' career in Buffalo, it has been quite the bit up and down. Better ups, more ups, I would say, than downs without a doubt. But after every season, at least the last couple, it did appear that at least there was some mini fracture maybe between Diggs and the team. Well, this time the fracture is done. Right now, Diggs goes over to Houston, where he will be paired with Nico Collins, one of the great up-and-coming wide receivers in the NFL. Great quarterback in C.J. Stroud. Needless to say, Houston is making a big push, I would say, toward a Super Bowl next year. Now, what Buffalo decides to do will definitely be the next question, because that's probably what you're wondering is who is Josh Allen going to throw the ball to? Dalton Kincaid? Shakir, they really don't have a primary number one wide receiver. And so the NFL draft coming fast and furious, you would have to think that's the Buffalo Bills direction at this point. So we will see. Do they move up? Do they figure things out? Do they sign a free agent as well? Stay tuned. This is breaking news here on the show. All right, now let's get to the latest in college hoops. We'll start off on the women's side with LSU and Iowa. Folks, in case you missed it, you were one of the few because 12.3 million viewers watched this game, and it was the most watched women's college basketball game ever. It also broke records for being more watched than every ESPN college basketball game last year, every baseball game, every NHL game, every MLS, NBA. And it broke the record for being the most watched game except for one college football game last season. So no surprise, Caitlin Clark moves the needle once again. Women's college basketball, not only on the rise, they have arrived without a doubt. All right, Joel Embiid did in fact return to the Philadelphia 76ers lineup last night. He had 24 points. He had 7 assists. He had 3 steals. He had 6 rebounds in the win over Oklahoma City. The final was 109-105. The 76ers are still in the play-in game, but with a couple of wins, maybe they could pull out of it and get into the actual playoffs and not the play-in games. That would be the goal for who was thought to be the MVP in Joel Embiid, but missed too many games this season. Another piece of breaking news on the show today, as the Charlotte Hornets are going to be looking for a new head coach. Steve Clifford is announced that he is stepping down at the end of the season. He will move to the front office, and Charlotte's going to have to figure out who their next head coach is going to be. But it's the end of, up and down run, I would say at best for Steve Clifford. Hornets are going to have to find a way to get back where they want to be. Okay, this is not a surprise here, I guess. Bronny James is leaving USC. It was announced that he is headed into the transfer portal after Andy Enfield, the head coach, decided that he is going to leave to go coach at SMU. So his career at USC comes to an end. Just one season at USC, 25 games, 6 starts. He missed the first 8 games, of course, due to that cardiac arrest that he had in July. He averaged just 4.8 points, 2.8 rebounds, 2.1 assists, and 19 minutes per game. His next step, obviously, TBD, to be determined. Also, FAU star basketball player John L. Davis has also entered the transfer portal. And no surprise here, is a great player. He's going to the NFL or the NBA draft. Excuse me, got NFL on the mind. Davis was the AAC Player of the Year, a shared award, 18.2 points, 6.3 rebounds, 2.9 assists, 41% from the field. Expected to be a first-round draft pick in the upcoming NBA draft. Now, last night in the NBA, Kawhi Leonard missed another game, this one due to knee soreness, and they beat the Hornets 130-118 on Sunday. But the question is, can he return for Thursday's game against Denver? And also the Utah Jazz Their GM, Justin Zanuck, underwent successful kidney transplant surgery. 49 years old. We are hoping, of course, for the best. Thoughts and prayers with his family as well. Major League Baseball last night. Guess who popped off for the first time this season? Bryce Harper. Not one, not two, 3 home runs for Harper last night. He was 0-11 in the first 4 games, but last night he hit a couple and then hit a grand slam. Second career 3-homer game, 26th multi-homer game overall. He finished with a career-best 6 runs driven in. The Texas Rangers got a bit of bad news, and this has now happened 2 years in a row as they've lost Josh Young yet again, this time for wrist surgery. And was announced, the general manager, Chris Young, said yesterday he was hit by a pitch by Phil Maton of Tampa Bay. Justin Foscue, one of the top prospects in the Rangers organization, was recalled from AAA to replace Young, who's going to miss approximately 6 weeks of time. Unfortunately, some sad news for Red Sox Nation and their family. Larry Lucchino passed away at the age of 78, suffering from cancer, engineered as the CEO, some very successful years with the Boston Red Sox. In fact, he was with the team and the ownership with John Henry and Tom Werner as well. Larry Lucchino passes away at the age of 78. Also in baseball last night, a big win for the Chicago Cubs. They're off to a great start. They win 12-2, and their first baseman, Garrett Cooper, with a home run, a triple, and a double in that game. He fell a single short of the cycle. Major League Baseball games going on. We got a full slate this afternoon. Let me give you a quick preview of these games. We got the Royals taking on the Orioles. Cole Reagan's their ace, Corbin Burns, the ace of the Orioles today. That game will begin just after 1 o'clock Eastern. Baltimore minus 172 on the money line there. Chris Paddock, Joe Ross, Twins and Brewers. Looks to be a potentially close game in Milwaukee. Minus 110, 106 on both sides. And Atlanta Braves, Chicago White Sox. That's the next game to start, 2:10 Eastern. As you can see, this is the biggest favorite of the day. The Braves are minus 350 on the money line today. Okay, good news for Mississippi. They've had legalized sports betting in person, struggling to get this thing going online for a few years, but they're now moving closer to mobile sports betting. On Tuesday, a House bill was passed by the Senate's Gaming Committee. The Senate now has until April 11th to take it to the floor. Mississippi was the 3rd state to have sports betting, just didn't get it online for a period of time. Not great news in Kansas City, Missouri, where Jackson County voters last night rejected a 40-year sales tax that would have helped pay for the new downtown Royals ballpark in KC. Also included a new stadium for the Kansas City Chiefs as well. So where they will play in the future still to be determined. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has re-signed with the Kansas City Chiefs, and also Morgan Riley, defenseman for the Toronto Maple Leafs, will return tonight from injury. But coming up next, we preview the Final Four. Kyle Irving will be with us, and we'll take a look at NC State Purdue to lead it off. Don't go away.
So I'm not sure Alabama is the team to knock them off from this second consecutive national championship chase. But what will be the key for the Crimson Tide if they can even cover a number?
That wing ball screen action, how you defend that is going to be a problem because of Donovan Clingan. It forces you to change so much what you do defensively if he's able to score inside.
Only on SportsGrid.
Talk all you want about how fat he is. No one can guard him. No one can stop him. He's a violent offender. He does whatever he wants in the low block and at the 10. He just does whatever he wants and scores at will, ad nauseum.
They're the Mike Tyson of college basketball. At some point, they're going to throw a haymaker. And when it connects, Pharrell, you're not getting up.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. the New York team has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
NewsWire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from three on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live. Prime time.
We got not one, but two coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
late
sort of
night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
NewsWire here on SportsGrid. The Final Four is coming up Saturday. 2 games, championship on Monday night. Kyle Irving is with us to give us a preview as to what we can expect, as we've got 2 teams heavily favored. And when I mean heavily, you don't see this that often. Almost 2 double-digit favorites to advance to the championship. Let's get Kyle's thoughts on the games upcoming. Kyle, thanks again for coming on NewsWire. And it's sort of rare to see this disparity in point spreads for 2 games, but I guess with the dominance of UConn, not a surprise. I suppose some people are a little bit surprised that Purdue is 9.5-point favorites over NC State, right?
Yeah, I mean, with UConn, it seems like the challenge is holding them to a double-digit lead. That's just how it's been all tournaments so far. They have completely ran away with every game that they have played. The Purdue side is interesting to me because NC State has been really good against the spread in this tournament. But Purdue has a formula. They've been wearing down teams in the first half with Zach Edey. They might not jump out to the massive leads that we've seen UConn get out to, but then over time, opposing front courts pick up fouls. They get into foul trouble. These NCAA teams don't have a lot of big men depth. And when you're going against Zach Edey, that's a big problem. And that's where Purdue's ran away with it in the second half of a lot of these games. So, I think that NC State could keep it close in the first half, but, not to go with the chalk picks here. The favorites are the favorites for a reason. And it feels like, Zach Edey and Donovan Clingan are on a collision course to facing each other in the national championship.
Which would be awesome and fun, I think, for everybody, if that indeed happened. But if not, and it was NC State, I mean, Kyle, I don't think anybody would argue, because this kid, DJ Burns, in this new day and age of social media and sports and NILs, has really made a name for himself during the NCAA tournament. He was the ACC tournament MVP, 15 points a game. You could probably say that without him, NC State has no shot to be where they are right now. There's some talk maybe he'll even play in the NBA at some point, but he has been, fair to say, one of the most popular players in the tournament this year, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. What DJ Burns is doing is absolutely incredible. I mean, Kyle Filipowski is supposed to be, a potential NBA lottery pick, and he made him look like, he was a high school senior in that game against Duke. Just the fluidity that DJ Burns plays with. He's really, really, soft on his feet. He has good footwork in the post. He has smooth touch with that left hand. He's a good passer out of the post. He's such a talented offensive weapon. That's why he's drawing comparisons to Zach Randolph, who was a multi-time All-Star in the NBA. And this isn't to say that DJ Burns is going to be Zach Randolph in the NBA. It's just a pretty solid player comparison for what he's doing on the college stage right now. And you said this goes all the way back to the ACC tournament. I mean, he was putting up these numbers against UNC in the ACC championship to lead NC State on this run in the first place. And then, to do that against a pretty solid Duke front court. He's going to have his hands full with Zach Edey, and I don't know how much of the same stuff that he's going to be able to get away with against Edey that he has against the rest of the tournament field. But, this is not to be taken lightly. DJ Burns is going to bring his best game, and, he's really quick, and Zach Edey might have a little bit of trouble with that, guarding him in the post.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see these two match up. I mean, Edey has been incredible for Purdue. He's probably now at this point, is it fair to say best player ever at Purdue in college basketball? I mean, the stats will tell you that it is, but I guess let's expand the conversation here. For the time being, Kyle, they're allowing player props in some places. This could be going away in the United States, by the way, after this year. But Edey's points are 25.5 for the game, 13.5 rebounds on FanDuel. Does Edey have to go over these numbers for Purdue to win? It seems like he has. Yeah, I don't know, one-man show is not fair, but it seems like when he goes off, Purdue wins big.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of already said it. Like Edey, the way that they have done this is they are wearing down teams in the first half. They're dumping the ball into him, really letting him go to work early. I think he's had a double-double in the first half of every game that he's played so far in the tournament. I mean, he's averaging 30 points, 14 rebounds, and almost 2 blocks per game. It's saying the history is saying that those numbers should go over on those players. The thing that interests me about Purdue in this matchup is this is one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. They shot 40.8% from three-point range. That was the number one rank in the NCAA. So when guys like Fletcher Loyer, Mason Gillis, Braden Smith have it going, that makes life really easy for Zach Edey in the middle because they can dump the ball in. Teams can't really dig down, double team because they have to worry about the shooters. So as long as those guys have it going from three-point range, NC State's front court is not that big. DJ Burns is only 6'9". Mohamed Diarra, he doesn't have, the bulk that he needs to guard Zach Edey. Same goes for Ben Middlebrook. So, if Edey can get these guys into foul trouble early the same way that he did against teams like Gonzaga and Tennessee, then, I think he should be able to achieve those numbers of, the player props that you mentioned.
Yeah, and 3 big men in this day and age of college basketball leading the way. You don't generally see this. It's guard play that's usually gotten teams this far with Clingan and Edey and Burns. I guess 2 have better draft prospects than Burns, the first 2. But at this point, it's fair to say that with the way that the NBA is trending, and we see Luka and Wemby and all these other players, the bigger they get, if they can handle the ball, the higher they go in the NBA draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what makes the case so interesting for Clingan and Edey specifically, because we're watching these guys completely dominate the NCAA tournament, but you have to show a level of fluidity and mobility to be able to guard at the next level, guard in space, because it's so pick and roll heavy. And like you said, you got guards like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Stephen Curry, Luka Doncic, who are really, really tough to guard in space. And I think that Donovan Clingan did a great job of showing that in their matchup against Illinois. That, in my opinion, as great as Zach Edey has been, that was one of the most dominant performances of the NCAA tournament. I think at the under 12-minute mark, before things really got blown open, Illinois only had 2 made field goals when Donovan Clingan was on the floor. That's how dominant he was on the defensive end. So, these guys are both Edey and Clingan are helping their draft stock in a big way in this tournament. And I'm not sure that's something that, people would have expected at the start of this, because it kind of felt like their draft stock had a ceiling. But both of these guys have blown straight through that ceiling. Zach Edey looking like a certified first-round pick. Donovan Clingan in the latest ESPN mock draft, they're talking about potentially number 1 overall entering that conversation. So it's getting really interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on now to the second game. And look, we're all going to hope for a close game here, but UConn just hasn't played any. The other interesting part, I think, as we look at the total in this game, Kyle, is that Alabama, who has continued to just put up points on everybody in college basketball this season, we've seen the totals come down significantly. And in this game in particular, this is probably one of the lowest totals we've seen the Crimson Tide play, maybe dating back even before the SEC tournament. That's because UConn's defense is probably just as good as their offense. As you see here, it's 160.5 on FanDuel, and UConn 11.5 point favorites. So is this much ado about nothing? Does UConn just roll like they have? Or do we finally see a team that gives them a fight in a tournament game?
I think the reason that number is down so much is because Mark Sears, really talented player, he's averaging 24 points per game in the NCAA tournament, but UConn has the defensive matchups to make life really tough for an All-American guard. You have Stephon Castle, who's 6'6", another potential NBA lottery pick. Tristan Newton, who is an All-American, he's 6'5". Those are guys that are both comfortable guarding players as quick as Mark Sears, who is only 6'1". So, he is the head of the snake. If they can slow him down, then I think this is going to be a really, really tough night for Bama. And the same goes for Grant Nelson, who was incredible in the game against North Carolina and part of the reason why Alabama moved on in the first place. But, going up against Donovan Clingan, that's going to be a really tough matchup. So if those two guys can't get it going, then, that's why it feels like UConn can really start to run away with this game the same way they have in some of the others. And I do expect UConn's defense to prevail. I mean, it has been bulletproof at this point. And on top of that, too, UConn is only shooting 28% from three in this tournament. This is a team that shot the three ball pretty well during the regular season. So we haven't even seen their best shooting night either. So, Alabama, really talented team, really talented offense. But I do think that, the spread and the over-under are both indicative of how good UConn's defense is and how well they match up against Alabama's offense.
Let's show the graphic to win the national championship, Kyle. I'm not going to hold you to this, okay? You can't take UConn here. You got to pretend someone else is going to win. I'm not going to hold you to it. Social media, we may post this. Want to be clear, Kyle probably likes UConn like everybody else, but he can't take UConn. I'm not letting him. Take someone else.
I hate to just go with the next one down on the totem pole, but if it's not UConn, I feel like it's Purdue. I mean, Zach Edey is playing at such a high level right now, and I do feel like, he could match up really well with Donovan Clingan and make that life tough. So, if their shooters can get it going, I think they got it done.
All right, thanks, Kyle.
So I'm not sure Alabama is the team to knock them off from this second consecutive national championship chase. But what will be the key for the Crimson Tide if they can even cover a number?
That wing ball screen action, how you defend that is going to be a problem because Donovan Clingan forces you to change so much what you do defensively if he's able to score inside.
Only on SportsGrid.
Talk all you want about how fat he is. No one can guard him. No one can stop him. He's a violent offender. He does whatever he wants in the low block and at the 10. He just does whatever he wants and scores at will, ad nauseum.
They're the Mike Tyson of college basketball. At some point, they're going to throw a haymaker. And when it connects, Pharrell, you're not getting up.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
NewsWire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell Coast to Coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from three on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live. Prime time.
We got not one, but two coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
Late
sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Great to have Jim Gazzale from Legal Sports Report with us. We're going to get into a little PGA Tour news and notes. We'll start off with North Carolina and some sports betting figures as they've opened up sports betting. I think we're almost 1 month in here, a little bit about a week away from that. Jim Gazzale's with us. Hey, Jim, great to have you back here on NewsWire. Thanks for diving in.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Craig.
All right, well, the NCAA tournament is coming to an end. We got the Final Four coming up. We got one team left from North Carolina. We've got the Wolf Pack in it, but I don't think that that's really factored in at all to some of these numbers with sports betting. I mean, I guess it doesn't hurt that Duke went far, North Carolina State, etc. But bottom line is that North Carolina is a basketball state. Maybe some say it's a football state too. I mean, that remains to be seen. But historically speaking, it's a basketball state. What did the numbers show as we wrap up the first full month? I know the first month is over, but the first full month of North Carolina sports betting.
Yeah, we're getting our first sort of initial glimpse at the sports betting figures in North Carolina. The North Carolina Lottery had a meeting last week where they shared the figures from the first day or half a day since the market opened at noon on March 11th. And then through the first week as well. That's about all we've gotten our eyes on at this point. But a couple of interesting things that came out of that initial report, especially on the first day or those first 12 hours, promo spending, as we've seen in other markets that open up across the U.S., very promotional spending heavy by the online sportsbook. So the promotional spending actually outweighed the actual real dollars wagered by bettors over those first 12 hours. $12.4 million in free bets given out by the operators. Compare that to $11.6 million in real money deposits and wagers. Through the first week, we sort of, saw that sort of smooth out a little bit, if you will. $81.3 million in promo spending by the operators to $116.8 million in real money betting from North Carolina sports bettors. Now, if you recall, that first week featured the ACC tournament, like to your point, Craig, North Carolina, a very, very heavy basketball state. So the fact that North Carolina State performed well in the ACC tournament, UNC as well, and Duke too, that played a significant role in the handle there. The regulators on the meeting were kind of projecting out what the rest of that first full month would look like, and they landed around $600 million, a little less than $600 million when you combine the handle and the promotional spending, just kind of using that first day and that first week to kind of bear that out. But they did caution that, of course, like we've seen in other markets, that promotional spending is going to drop off, after the first couple of weeks. So probably won't get that high, but still the projections from our Eric Ramsey at Legal Sports Report was putting it at around $7 billion in overall handle over those first 12 months. So through that first year, $7 billion in handle projected in North Carolina.
All right. Well, North Carolina will continue to see an increase, I'm sure, in the college and pro football season, although, again, baseball season a little bit different, I think, in that state than maybe some others. Okay, now let's get to the PGA Tour. They've got some data behind an increase in sports betting. And Jim, what is behind this? Is it simply states like North Carolina becoming legal? Is it more of an interest in the game? I know that a lot of records will be shattered, certainly for the Masters next week, because more people betting on sports. Biggest tournament in golf each year is the Masters. What is the data showing?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of those things, Craig. Golf popularity in terms of betting has increased 14% through the tour's first 11 tournaments this year in 2024 compared to last year. So certainly just from a dollar and cent standpoint on the betting side, it's a more popular option than it was last year. And to your other point about North Carolina and just that sort of area of the country, very golf heavy. People really like golf there. They play a lot of golf there because the weather's nice. And there's plenty of golf tournaments there throughout the year, which certainly drums up a lot of interest. Now, when I spoke to some PGA Tour executives over the last couple of weeks, kind of tying it into this North Carolina launch, a couple of things stuck out to me. They told me that their typical customer, the typical consumer of PGA Tour content, tends to be a little bit on the older side. So what they're doing to try and capture that younger demographic is more live betting. So their North Carolina sports betting partner, FanDuel, the two of them teamed up within the last several months to have a live betting feature in the FanDuel app, and they are hoping that draws in a bit of a younger audience. You can do shot-by-shot betting. It shows you like an overlay of graphics like we've seen in the past with BetVision with the NFL. This golf event center, as it's called, the PGA Tour and FanDuel are really banking on this, kind of helping to bring about a younger audience, help grow golf handle overall. Like we've seen already, like I mentioned off the top here, 14% increase in overall golf betting handle in the U.S. over those first 11 tournaments this year for the PGA Tour.
All right, let's end real quick here, Jim, with Kentucky, a state that you're quite familiar with because the Kentucky Derby, of course, coming up. Jim is a horse racing savant, covers it both for Legal Sports Report and also has fun following the ponies himself. Now, help me understand the story here a little bit. Is this a big deal that there is a track in Kentucky that essentially does not want to have sports betting? And what is behind it? Is it just some old school thinking, not wanting to interrupt what's going on there? Because it would seem to me that even having a kiosk or two to bet on sports anywhere in the country would increase revenue for that location. So what gives here?
Yeah, it's kind of a, I don't know if a double-edged sword is kind of the way to describe it. And is this a good thing or a bad thing? Perhaps yes and no. I guess we'll have to see. So as you know, the sports betting licenses in Kentucky are tied to the racetrack. So, for example, Churchill Downs, home of the Kentucky Derby, they have a brick and mortar retail in-person sportsbook on the grounds there. A handful of the other racetracks around the state, whether thoroughbred or harness racing, they have in-person sportsbooks on the grounds there as well. Keeneland, however, one of the more popular thoroughbred racetracks in Kentucky and really in the U.S., does not have an in-person sportsbook, mostly because they only race for two pockets out of the year, in the spring here in April, and then later on in the fall through October. So most times out of the year, there's not a lot of action there. So I spoke to some track executives earlier in the week just to see if they wanted to potentially bring these sports betting kiosks in while they're going to, be welcoming 200,000 plus visitors over the next couple of weeks. Their meet starts on Friday and runs through just about to the end of April. They told me no. Their partner, Red Mile Gaming and Racing, which is also in Lexington, closer proximity to downtown, is doing quite well in terms of the retail side, and they have a good partnership there. So they're seeing a decent share of revenue from that operation. So there was no need to bring in sports betting kiosks to Keeneland for their spring meet. Now, I guess you could say, I kind of looked at this two different ways. Yes, there is not really a lot of live sports going on during the races. The races take place, from noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon and, are usually wrapped up by 6 o'clock before, the main sporting events happen. It is also Final Four weekend. You have, Kentucky is also a popular basketball state, despite University of Kentucky bowing out of the tournament early on. So they just told me that it didn't really make sense to bring these kiosks in. The other kind of hurdle that I thought was pretty interesting is that they would need a separate sports betting license to have these kiosks on the ground. So I imagine that the cost of that, the administrative hurdle of that, just didn't make the juice worth the squeeze because they have this partnership at Red Mile. They did tell me, though, that they reserve the right to change their mind in the future. So perhaps with NFL, college football going on in October, when the races return to Keeneland in the fall, perhaps it might make more sense then. But for now, no sports betting kiosks at Keeneland for their spring meet, which begins on Friday.
All right, Jim. Great to have you here on the show. We'll talk again soon. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Thanks, Craig.
All right, the NFL, let's get to this real quick. Full compensation has been reported for Stephon Diggs as the trade is now complete. Diggs is going to Houston, and the Buffalo Bills are getting a second-round pick in return. There's also a swap of later picks going back to Houston. We'll be right back.
So I'm not sure Alabama is the team to knock them off from this second consecutive national championship chase. But what will be the key for the Crimson Tide if they can even cover a number?
That wing ball screen action, how you defend that is going to be a problem because Donovan Clingan forces you to change so much what you do defensively if he's able to score inside.
Only on SportsGrid.
Talk all you want about how fat he is. No one can guard him. No one can stop him. He's a violent offender. He does whatever he wants in the low block and at the 10. He just does whatever he wants and scores at will, ad nauseum.
They're the Mike Tyson of college basketball. At some point, they're going to throw a haymaker. And when it connects, Pharrell, you're not getting up.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
NewsWire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell Coast to Coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from three on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live. Prime time.
We got not one, but two coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage Late
Sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. We've got updated news and notes on the upcoming broadcast of the Masters and other topics as well, as we always bring in Simon Applebaum for a weekly chat. His podcast is tomorrow, will be televised, covering sports media, news, notes, business, sports betting as well. Hey, Simon, great to have you back here on the show.
Great to be back. A couple of quickies in terms of breaking news. If you're a fan of the Harlem Globetrotters, you are in luck because you're going to get a new Harlem Globetrotters television network coming your way in the next few weeks, thanks to a company called Spacebot, which does a number of different channels for smart TV sets, device and multi-channel bundles. The Harlem Globetrotters, which has been a very popular TV attraction for decades. Last couple of years, they've had the Saturday morning NBC series, Play It Forward, which is also on Telemundo in Spanish. They will be having their own television channel. It'll be a mix of new games, classic games, player profiles, and other original programming. Also, for those of you who love cue sports like pool, snooker, billiards, etc., you're about to get a new television network devoted to those sports. It's called Kazoom TV. It's going to be on Freecast, which is the multi-channel bundle, probably the biggest multi-channel bundle of basis. They have like 800 channels right now, and they made a deal with a company called SoFast, which has been producing these multi-channel programs, or I should say fast ad sport channels, and that's going to be one of them that's going to be on, and that is already on the air on Freecast. So for all you pool fans, you now have, like other sports, a network all your own.
All right. Well, we got big news yesterday. It was reported that the NCAA tournament has been the most watched ever. And I think the surprise for some, Simon, is when they said it was the most watched ever for any sport on the women's side. I mean, 12.3 million viewers watched LSU and Iowa, and ESPN broke all kinds of records for this. It was the most watched game of any event that they had in the past year other than one college football game. I mean, that's sort of incredible, isn't it?
Absolutely amazing. And it just goes to show how women's college basketball, thanks to stars like Clayton Clark, Angel Reese, et cetera, have become superstars, not just in the sport, but outside the sport, and have captured the imagination, especially Clark, captured the imagination of the American public. 12.3 million people watched the game Monday night. I also was helped by the excellent play-by-play of Ryan Rucco and commentary by Rebecca Lobo and the courtside interviews by Holly Rowe. Tremendous game. And I have a hunch that when ESPN does the semifinals, the Final Four on Friday night, they have both games. Iowa, Connecticut, by the way, will be the second game at 9 p.m. We may see that 12.3 million viewership mark broken. I see it at least 14, 15 million people. In addition, if Iowa makes the finals against South Carolina or NC State, we could see, even though the game is going to be on Sunday afternoon on ABC, I wish it was Sunday night, it will probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 20 million. So in terms of the women's tournament, it's been an incredible run for ESPN and for that sport. As far as the men's basketball tournament is concerned, the Duke-North Carolina State game on CBS, 15.1 million viewers. That's the most in terms of a college basketball game in terms of the championship since 2019. And both of the games on CBS on last weekend had, in terms of average, almost 12 million viewers. So big thing for CBS. We'll see what happens with the Final Four when it goes to either TBS, TNT, and Max this Saturday and then Monday night. It'll be interesting to see whether, depending on how the games go, whether we do have a new record in terms of several years of college basketball Final Fours or not.
Let's now discuss how college basketball has gone to the next level here. You mentioned more people watching the women. 4% increase in the men is what I'm reading here. And now a new series on ABC and ESPN Plus that is going to feature some of the players that we're watching right now. So to me, with having the increase, Simon, it only makes sense that they would capitalize on this. The question is, will this original series be as watched as much as the games?
Probably not, because docuseries tend to be less in terms of live gameplay. Now, nevertheless, ABC and ESPN Plus could not have timed this better. It comes next month. It comes after the Women's Basketball Final Four. It comes when the WNBA is about to start its season. Clark, we know, is going to be there. Angel Reese might be. As of this moment, we still don't know whether she's going to make the move to turn pro. Either way, I think this is very well timed, and ABC is trying to dive into the sports docuseries market that Netflix has been doing very well with for a long time. Other mega content services like Peacock and so forth are doing it too. So this is a great move by ABC. And if I was ABC, I would put this full court press series on in prime time as opposed to daytime. during the weekends. I think they could get more of an audience if they go primetime with this series.
All right, now let's get to the new news from MLB Network as they're expanding. And, there's a lot of talk, Simon, about baseball broadcasts and where and what they're going to look like in the future. We know some of the RSNs are now continuing because of Amazon stepping up and investing, while some, the keys to the kingdom, have been handed over to Major League Baseball and the teams. MLB Network is expanding as well, moving over to another broadcast entity. Which one is this?
Well, they're going to Hulu plus Live TV. So it's Hulu, the mega content service, with their multi-channel bundle. That's why they call it Hulu plus Live TV. I think this is more than just a move to one particular service. I think this may be the beginning of MLB moving off cable and satellite, which has fewer and fewer subscribers by the month, and they're going to move to more mega content services, smart TV services, multi-channel bundles. So I could see them making deals with the likes of Samsung, LG, Vizio, other smart TV set bundles, as well as bundles like Freecast, Tubi, Xumo, Pluto TV, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's the way that not only this network, but the other single sports networks, whether it's NFL Network, NBA TV, NHL, et cetera, are going to go, because the fewer cable subscribers you have, the fewer eyeballs you have for advertising, unless you make the move to smart TV sets and devices, which become the way, more of the way that people watch television. This is a good move by MLB. And as far as the overall baseball pictures, so we should point out, Sunday Night Baseball came back on ESPN this past Sunday. The game had about 1.8 million viewers watching. That's up 17% from the opening game last year on ESPN. They got the Houston Astros Texans game coming up next Sunday night. I think it's going to be even better in terms of the viewership. And like you said, we got to watch how these regional sports networks go. Don't forget, you have Apple TV Plus back in terms of doing Friday Night Baseball doubleheaders. They started this past Friday. They could get some games. If any of these regional sports networks drop out or go belly up, you could have MLB Network get more games. You get broadcast stations get more games, and you get the likes of Apple and maybe Amazon getting more games as well. So this, I think, is going to be a very big transitional year for baseball on television.
Well, Simon, the transition now for sports viewing goes from Major League Baseball and the Final Four to the biggest golf event of the year, which is coming up next week, of course, the Masters. And Simon, Jim Nantz is back for yet another year. I would probably predict this is the most wagered on sports event coming up this month and the most watched event as well. What will the broadcast look like?
It will look like what it's looked like for decades. It will be pretty. You will have great camera shots. You have wonderful angles. You've got a great golf crew led by Jim Nantz, Trevor Inman, his second year in the main analyst chair. And CBS does a marvelous job with the Masters in terms of the production. And Augusta National Golf Club, who I have big issues with, I've had them for years in terms of how they run the behind the scenes of CBS's coverage. They do a great job running the tournament. It's the best tournament around. We're going to have both PGA and LIV golf players get involved too. I think you're going to have like 15, 20 players have a shot at the green jacket this year. In addition, I think one of the things that's interesting about the Masters is it's been fan friendly. You get very few commercial interruptions per hour. There's only 3 sponsors, both on the CBS coverage and also, which is simulcast on Paramount Plus, and also on ESPN's coverage. Behind the scenes, I'm sure that every CBS affiliate does not like it because they can't sell local time. If you watch the Masters, there are no local station breaks. There's no local time at all. You got to go either before or after the coverage on the weekends. And in the case of ESPN, the same thing with cable operators. They cannot sell local time during the Masters coverage. However, it's very fan-friendly, and that's what people like every year after year after year. Now, you had the guy from Legal Sports Report on before this, and I should point out that you remember a couple weeks ago we talked about the Comcast DraftKings Sports Betting on TV venture, which started with betting on the Players' Championship. We don't know at this point if you're going to be allowed to bet on the Masters through that service. I have a hunch that given the extremely old school way the Augusta National Golf Club operates, they would not allow Comcast and DraftKings to have their odds note service be a service where you can bet sports on the Masters. That's just my feeling. Maybe we'll be surprised a week from now. We'll see.
Well, Simon, great stuff as always. Thanks again for coming on NewsWire. Really appreciate it. We'll catch up again and talk more next week. Thanks for coming on.
You got it, Craig. Enjoy the Final Four, both men and women's, this weekend.
All right, Simon Applebaum with us here, and his podcast you can always catch. Tomorrow will be televised. Now, naturally, we've got a big matchup coming up this weekend. We've got two of them. But one of the big ones, of course, the question remains, is UConn just going to roll everybody on their way to a national championship? That's what's been happening thus far. A lot of breakdown, by the way, on all of our shows here on SportsGrid, not just ours, but, of course, on the early line. And yesterday on Coast to Coast, our buddies Mike Carver and Joe Lisi talked about the matchup between the Crimson Tide and Huskies and asked that same question. Can the Crimson Tide keep this game close, maybe cover, and maybe even win against the team that's favored? Take a listen.
The late game, which will have Alabama and UConn. UConn, of course, has absolutely demolished everybody. They can't be beaten. It's over with. Just have them cut down the nets now. Why play the games? Minus 11.5 against Bama, 160.5. Not going to be any rock fight here, Joe. That's for sure. But again, Alabama, we talk about live by the three, die by the three. And we've seen some teams that do that in this tournament that have gone down. Alabama has not yet. They have been great shooting the ball from the outside. And, Joe, they have got to hit them hard and hit them early with the three in this game on Saturday night.
What's our saying, Carver? Fast and loose.
Fast and loose.
And I agree with that. That's the way. You know why? Because the dogs dictate the tempo, right? So if this game is going to be played a half-court style, that favors UConn and all of those playmakers. I don't think Alabama has a shot to win that game. This game becomes fast and loose where Alabama's going to start chucking up threes in the first half. If they take 15 in the first 10 minutes, guess what? They hit 6 of them, 7 of them, and they build a first-half lead. Game on, and it's the first team to 100 wins. And the way Sears has played, he's a confident player, even though he started 0 for 7, still finished with 20-plus points in that victory the other night against Clemson. I understand it was Clemson, but still, they play that way, the way they did in the second half against UConn in the first half. They have a shot. Again, I'm on the ticket. 30-1, 35-1, respectively, and I'm taking the points, but I'm taking the money line too. I'm taking Sears. I'm all in. I love the over. I think we get to potentially 180, 190 points. I'm going in all in with Nate Oates in the Roll Tide. Roll Tide, baby.
You are a lot more confident than I am. I'm with you, as you know. I'm with you, very invested here. We got a 30, I got a 23. I think I went in again at 17 this past weekend. So believe me, we're both rooting hard for Alabama on Saturday night. I'm not as confident as you.
All right, Coast to Coast this afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern. Okay, we'll take one final time out here on the show. We'll recap the big trade in the National Football League as Stephon Diggs leaving Buffalo and heading to the Houston Texans. I'll have my thoughts on that. And also, almost an injury yesterday in Major League Baseball with a player and a mascot? I'll tell you next.
So I'm not sure Alabama is the team to knock them off from this second consecutive national championship chase. But what will be the key for the Crimson Tide if they can even cover a number?
That wing ball screen action, how you defend that is going to be a problem because of Donovan Clingan, it forces you to change so much what you do defensively if he's able to score inside.
Only on SportsGrid.
Talk all you want about how fat he is. No one can guard him. No one can stop him. He's a violent offender. He does whatever he wants in the low block and at the 10. He just does whatever he wants and scores at will, ad nauseum.
They're the Mike Tyson of college basketball. At some point, they're going to throw a haymaker. And when it connects, Pharrell, you're not getting up.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
NewsWire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from three on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not one, but two coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
Late
sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire, recapping our top story of the day. End of an era in Buffalo. Stephon Diggs now headed to his third team in the NFL, from Minnesota to Buffalo. Now he's headed on to Houston as he'll pair up with Nico Collins and C.J. Stroud and Dalton Schultz, that great offense that the Texans had last season. He's headed there. And Josh Allen looking for a number one wide receiver, no doubt about that. Will they be able to draft one in the second round? That's the question. As the Bills received a second-round pick in the trade, the Texans get Diggs and also a sixth-round pick in 24, fifth-round pick in 25. So Houston gets Diggs. They already have Joe Mixon, Stroud, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. Buffalo has $30 million now of dead cap, whatever that means. I mean, we talk about dead cap. It doesn't really matter. Teams do whatever they want in the NFL. We focus way too much on that, by the way. This team can't do anything because of dead cap. Then they end up getting rid of the player. Never thought Russell Wilson would ever get traded because of dead cap money. He ended up getting traded, okay? So when you hear that stuff, ignore it. The teams are able to move on from it. The only question for Buffalo, I think at this point, are they going to parlay that second-round pick that they now have into somehow maybe their first-round pick and a second-round pick to move up in the draft to get one of the best receivers? Because it would seem to me that Buffalo will be in survival mode until then. Okay group of wide receivers with Shakir and some other players that they have in-house, but I would imagine Josh Allen's got to have a little bit more on the outside. But we'll see as time goes by. And again, the draft's coming up a little bit under a month from now. All right, that'll do it for our show today. Thanks again to Jim Gazzale from Legal Sports Report and Simon Applebaum, as well as Kyle Irving. Those were the guests of the show today. Our associate producer, Frank, our producer, Michael Cohen. I'm Craig Mish. Coming up next is the early line. 3 o'clock Eastern, we have Coast to Coast, and then everybody else covering the Major League Baseball games this afternoon. Live baseball action coming your way in 1 hour from now. 3 games at 1 o'clock, couple games at 2, couple games at 3 and 4, all day long. Afternoon baseball right here on SportsGrid. Follow along as your second screen with us, in addition to watching the game. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your night. I'll be back for another edition of NewsWire tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Have a great day.